Hello everyone, and welcome to Tom's Comic Curios, where you'll hear about comic books that you often don't hear about in other places. The strange, the weird comics, the obscure comics, things like that. Well, I got a good reaction to my Laffin Gas video, Blackthorne's Forgotten Humor Comics Anthology. So I thought, I have a bunch of other Blackthorne comics that I like, and I thought that instead of doing separate videos for each one, because a lot of them didn't last very long, it would be a good idea just to do them all in one video and just show you a bunch of other neat humor comics from Blackthorne that you might not have heard about. So the first one I'm going to look at is The Twisted Tantrums of the Purple Snit. This is the first issue. So what you see here is the purple snit on the cover there. He's the big guy, the purple guy, of course. And the blue funk is his friend. Now, the snit gets in a snit about a lot of different things. He's always upset about things. And his friend, the blue funk, is nervous around him, understandably, because he comes up with devious ways to get revenge on people or just to play practical jokes on people or something. I wouldn't even call it like revenge, but just like to just pull pranks and strange things on people and things that he doesn't like. So the script is by John Stevenson. The pencils are by Dennis Francis. The inks are by Michael Kelly, and the letters are by Craig Colbert. So the first story in the first issue is a Halloween issue. It's the first issue from 1986, just like a lot of these comics have been. And it's called Trick or Trash. It stars this dude who's one of the hamster guys from Hamster Vice, another Blackthorne comic. Hammy Hamster, that might be his name. I never read Hamster Vice, so I'm not sure. But you'll see the Snit has a whole bunch of traps in his house, so that if unwanted visitors show up, they fall into one of his traps. He's a very mean character, this Snit, this purple Snit. But this is a funny comic, though. It's a humor comic. I mean, it's not... Now, look at that. The blue funk there, he's getting in a real funk himself there. And it's nice to see how he, like, flattens out. It's drawn very well, and then so he gets an idea, and he turns into a light bulb. It's kind of neat. So yeah, a bunch of stuff happens in here. I don't think he likes trick-or-treaters very much, so there's like a centerfold page here, bowling for trick-or-treaters. So he's going to get up to some nasty business, I'm sure, with the trick-or-treaters. The second story is called With Great Power Comes Great Chuckles. I tell you more about what happens, but I don't remember. It's been a little while since I've read it. I've read it a few times, though. It's entertaining. It's an entertaining comic. Fun little weird comic. This in this one, the blue funk imagines himself as a costume crusader. Tries flying here. I don't think it goes very well, though. And just showing you some pages from the comic. I know that Newt from Ass Hat Podcast said that he ended up with several copies of either the first or the second issue of the Blue Snit. So that's interesting. I don't know if he did a video on the Snit, though. Newt, you can let us know in the comments if you've done one. But yeah, it's a very interesting comic book. Fun little goofy thing. Nice back cover on this one. Blue Snit says, I don't have to go to bed if I don't want to. It's my book. And the Blue Funk says, good night. See you next issue. He's got a get lost mat instead of a welcome mat. Because he really doesn't like anybody, the Blue Snit. I mean, the Purple Snit. He really doesn't. That's just, you know, he's a vindictive character. But it's all played for laughs. This is number 2 of the Blue Snit. There's only 2 issues. It didn't sell very well, I'm sure. How to cook venison. Now, this is a Christmas issue, so he wants to cook Santa's reindeer, I assume. He's studying up on that. If you remember from the Laffin Gas video, there was an all-hamster issue of Laffin Gas. And in one of the stories in that issue, I keep saying the Blue Snit, the Purple Snit was coming up with ways to cook hamsters, you know, and do stuff to hamsters. This story I do remember a little better. It's called The Traffic Zone. And it features like a Rod Serling type introduction, like a Twilight Zone introduction. And the blue snit. How many times am I going to say that? The Purple Snit. This story is about him getting even with drivers on the highway that he doesn't like drivers that are too slow, drivers that cut him off. It's like a road rage episode of the Purple Snit, basically. And I remember that there's a Geraldo Rivera parody in this issue, a character that's supposed to be like Geraldo Rivera. Yeah, see, now there's some little old ladies out there going out for a Sunday drive, and he's not happy about them going so slowly, so he flips their car up like with this huge spatula, and they go flying. And then he takes care of some guy that cuts him off. And I think he's got a tailgater. There's a guy in a big truck that's tailgating him. So he puts out some glue on the highway and the truck sticks to it. So he does a lot of silly stuff like that. It's a very silly comic book. There's the Geraldo Rivera character. That's supposed to be Geraldo. He makes Geraldo think that he's going to give him these presents and everything for some reason, but it's a trick, of course. And then he steals Geraldo's tires. It's not a very flattering caricature of Geraldo, really. Then we have a prose story, The Snit Before Christmas, which is actually just The Night Before Christmas. It's a parody of that poem. If you've read humor magazines, you'll know that they've done parodies of this poem by Clement Seymour many, many times. And this is The Snit Before Christmas. In fact, you know what? I think I'll read it to you. Why don't we just read that together? 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even this louse. Because he is a louse, that Purple Snit, you know. The veg-o-matic was installed in the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nick soon would be there. Oh, see, look at that. Purple Snit was nestled, all snug in his bed, while visions of carnage danced in his head. Funk in his jammies, with Wit in his lap. Oh yeah, Wit. Who's Wit? I can't remember now. That must be their pet or something. Had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out in the yard there arose a big clatter. Snit jumped out of the sack to see who did splatter. Away to the window he hopped in a flash, tore down the shutters and shredded the sash. There's St. Nicholas there. When what to his drowsy eyes should appear but a twerp of a sleigh and 8 deer. With a pipe-smoking driver just flicking his bick, he knew in a minute it must be St. Nick. More rapid than race cars, those deer they came. Nick whistled and shouted and called them insane. To the top of the porch, over the top of the wall, now dash away, smash away, crash away all. Then in a twinkle Snit heard on the roof the stamping and hacking of the little fat goof. Funk was hidden so as not to be found when Nick fell through the roof, which was structurally unsound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his toes, all bristly and curly like the hair in his nose. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back. He looked like a bag lady dressed in a sack. He had a bruised face with a beam on his tummy. Snit jumped on the board. Claus yelled for his mummy. Snit gave him a hand up and nodded his head, and Santa Claus knew he had something to dread. He brushed himself off and limped off to work, filled Snit's stocking with coal and called him a jerk. You haven't been good, not by a country mile. Mayhem and destruction are much more your style. You're a real cheese weenie. This is Christmas, you fool. And no toys for bad kids. And he turned to Skidoo. Fool, Skidoo, that didn't rhyme. Unable to avoid Snit's massive toes, Nick caught one in the butt, and up the chimney he rose. Through ashes and soot he flew up and away. The parts fell to the roof in utter disarray. I've forgotten my pack, Santa cried with a tear. You rotten little Snit, I'll get you next year. But they heard Nick exclaim as he filtered out of sight, put my pieces together so as I can get home tonight. The end. So that's I don't know if that was worth reading, but I read it anyway to give you an idea of this comic. It's not the greatest comic by any means. I don't know. I wouldn't really recommend it. But if you do want something that is weird, then this is weird, you know? I don't know what else to say about the Purple Snit. You can write your comments there. I mean, he's a mean-spirited character, you know? He's not likable in any way. So, it's an oddity. That's what that comic is. It's an oddity. The next one we're going to look at is the preteen Dirty Gene Kung-Fu Kangaroos, which I mentioned in the Laffin Gas video and in the Boris the Bear video as well, as one of those knockoffs of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where there's so many of them, like I said, the adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters and whatnot. And you saw there were many of them featured in Laffin Gas, parodies and real ones. And the Kangaroos were featured. Their origin story, if you remember, was featured in the first issue of Laffin Gas. So if you're a Kangaroos fan, you'll want to get that first issue of Laffin Gas as well. Now, I don't have the first issue of the Kangaroos. The first issue, I think, featured an appearance by the Turtles, a very brief appearance by the Mutant Ninja Turtles. So in this this is by Lee Mars, a female cartoonist who had some acclaim in the underground comics community, I believe, worked for Crazy Magazine in the 1970s, and this was her attempt at a Turtles-type comic. This is the second issue. They're fighting the Cabbage Batch Commandos. If I remember, there was some sort of, and they are kangaroos. They're actual kangaroos. And you notice that looks like a Cabbage Patch Kid too, right? So it's a parody of the Cabbage Patch Kids, which is neat. I always like popular culture parodies because I also collect humor magazines as well. If I can remember correctly, their origin, there is some sort of explosion or a genetic mutation at a lab. They're not really sure what happened. It's not really clear what happened. But they have a mentor They have a teacher who I believe is a parody of American Flag, which was another comic book from the 1980s. He looks, yeah, this guy, Rootin' Skag. No, Rootin' Slag, sorry, is his name. That's him right there. So I think he's a parody of American Flag, which I'd never read. So I didn't know that until I read about it online. But here it's an introduction to the kangaroos. I'll just read you this introduction. Meep is the leader of the pack. Meep's control of his nifty boomerang enables him to hit anything. One flaw, the boomer returns when it wants to. So it doesn't return when he wants it to. The boomerang returns when it wants to. So that's the problem with his weapon. Matsu Mike, master of all martial arts. MM excels in the dreaded tofu. Due to his eating habits, he is AKA the bottomless pit. Snurfet, so like Smurfette, but Snurfet. Glamour Puss and Supply Sergeant to the group. She can get everything she wants out of her pouch. Just a material girl. KO. Previously a computer whiz and gymnast, KO is now a walking database of facts. Also, her tail packs a slam bag wallop. Mr. K is a big kangaroo. He's just big. So this is another 1986 comic book from the Black and White Comics Explosion. We get these little like news breaks here where there's a kangaroo like doing the news, and they tell you what's going on to keep you up to speed with the story in the comic, which is good. I always like it when comics do that, because if you're missing a few issues, it's nice when they recap a bit at the beginning, you know, so that you know you're not completely lost when you read the next issue. So this story is called, and by the way, the artwork is really good, or it's pretty good anyway. It's pretty good artwork. Lee Mars is a good cartoonist, to be sure. She has a very unique style that's all her own. So it's quite appealing. The story is called Blow Up Real Good. And I think, it's never said in here, but I believe that would be a reference to Big Jim and Little Saul. Big Jim and Big Saul, or something like that. Hurok from SCTV, Joe Flaherty and John Candy, Big Jim and Billy Saul. That's it. Okay, so what they used to do is they had a show called Celebrity Farm Film Celebrity Blow Up, I believe it was called, on SCTV. And what they do is they have on a celebrity, which would be one of the other SCTV cast members impersonating that celebrity, and they'd interview them for a little bit, and then they blow them up. And it was funny. It was really funny. And they'd often blow up celebrities that they weren't fond of, from what I've heard. They blew up Neil Sedaka, who I really like. I'm a big fan of Neil Sedaka. He's one of my favorite singers and songwriters. But Eugene Levy did a funny imitation of him on the show. I doubt that Neil Sedaka would have liked it, though, if he's seen it. Bernadette Peters, they blew her up, which I also like Bernadette Peters. Some guy that was a dancer on Solid Gold or one of those shows. By the way, there's a funny story about that. Martin Short imitated him on that episode of SCTV, and he met him at an airport after that was shown, after it was aired, and the guy was really mad at him. He's like, how dare you blow me up on the show? You know, how disrespectful and all this. And Martin Short is really good at sweet-talking people. He's a really nice guy, too. So he somehow convinced the guy that it was a love letter. You know, that, oh, no, we just blow up people that we really like. So that was that was really funny. So, yeah, they blew up a bunch of different people. Dustin Hoffman, dressed as Tootsie, they blew him up as well. Who else did they blow up? Brooke Shields, I think? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they blew up Brooke Shields as well. That was a great show. SCTV, in my opinion, is the greatest sketch comedy show of all time. You know, better than Saturday Night. Way better, in my opinion. I just love SCTV. But anyway, I can make a whole video with SCTV sometime. But back to the comic book. I think that this is a reference to that because they would say when they blew somebody up, they'd say, they blowed up real good. That's what they would say every time. So that's probably a reference to that. So here's some more great artwork from the Kangaroos comic. It's a fun story. It's better than the Purple Snit, I would say. It's not the greatest comic. I wouldn't call it an undiscovered treasure, but it's a good comic, and it's a pleasant diversion. So, you know, I recommend giving it a shot. If you can find some copies in the quarter bins or 3 for $1 bins like I do, I'd say go for it. I actually did see the first issue of this, but it was in a bin and I forgot where it was, and I wasn't going to buy it. But then when I came on the second and third issues, there's only 3 issues. I thought, I'm going to buy it anyway, you know, because I used to own it years ago, and I said, I'm going to buy it again. It was a good comic. It wasn't bad. I'd like to have it again. I'd like to read these again. I'm glad I did. But I didn't want to find the first issue again because it was off in a bin, like somewhere else. And they have like hundreds and hundreds of bins at my comic store downtown, or these 3 for $1 comics. And like I say, I stay there all day going through these bins. And I just didn't feel like going through them just to find that one issue again. But sometime when I go back there, I might buy it. I probably will. I mean, why not? You know, then they'll have the whole set again. So yeah, so this is a cool comic book. So while I am putting it back into the wrapper, I will tell you that the third and last issue was this one was really fun actually. I like this one better than number 2. This is versus the Fast Food Fiends. Okay, so I'll take this out so you can see it better. Yeah, I recommend this. I mean, this is the 1980s. If you have a nostalgia for the 1980s, like I do, this is fun. This is fun stuff. It takes you right back, you know. So in this issue, I don't know if I can remember it well enough to tell you. There's a bunch of backstory here about what's going on. It's something to do with fast food. I don't think I can remember. But I would say just seek it out for yourself, and you'll have a good little read. I've mentioned before that I like comics with a lot of text because I really like to get into the story and I like to feel like I'm getting my money's worth. If a comic takes a while to read and I'm interested in the story, then yeah, I like to have a lot of text in the comic so I can get into it. Yeah, this is pretty exciting. The fast food fiends kidnapped the kangaroos, and they're going to deep fry them. They put them like in this big fryer or something like that, but they got out of it. But I really like the story behind it, though, like the commentary on the fast food industry, and which, I mean, I like fast food. It's just don't eat it too often because that's not good. It's not healthy to eat it too often. So I limit it. I only eat, you know, at Burger King. There's a Burger King near where I live, so I can just walk to it very easily. So that's a treat. When I get Burger King, that's a treat for myself. But I only do it maybe once a month or something like that, because you don't want to eat fast food too often. But yeah, it's good if you don't eat it too much, right? So that's a good comic. That's a good comic. So I recommend that more than the Snit comic. Now the next one we're going to look at is called The Man of Rust, the retold story. This was issued with two different covers. This is 1A, so this is the A cover. So there's a 1B cover as well, which I don't have because I don't buy comics with multiple covers. I think that's a waste of money to do that. I don't go for that thing, you know. I have the odd comic that's a double, very very few though, because usually I just give doubles away, or I just whatever, because I don't really need doubles in my collection. They just take up more space, and I see no point in buying a comic again just if it has a different cover on it if you've already got the contents of it. So I only have one copy of this. So this is a parody of the Man of... Well, it isn't actually. But you remember, if you watched my other videos, you'll remember I mentioned that in 1986, a comic book called The Man of Steel by John Byrne came out. And it reimagined the Superman legend and caused a big stir in the industry. So, to explain this to you, the easiest way to do it will be to read the introduction, the editorial here. Cliff McGillivray is the writer of this comic book, and he wrote, I think he wrote a number of these humorous Blackthorne comics. So like some other ones that I don't have, and some that I do have maybe, because maybe some Laffin Gas ones. But anyway, the art is by Rick Burchett, lettering is by Craig Corbett, and editor is Mike Friedrich. So, I've got an idea to publish a parody entitled Man of Rust, said Steve Shanes enthusiastically. I think he's the publisher of Blackthorne. Rich Burchett is going to illustrate it, and I want you to write the story. So he's saying this to Cliff, the writer. Saying yes was the easy part. Writing a parody of a comic I'd never seen was the hard part. You must realize I wrote this before Man of Steel was released. An interesting problem. The first part of my plan was to study John Byrne's style, so that the Man of Rust would have the same feel. That proved unsatisfying. When I discovered that although Byrne is an excellent and skilled artist and writer, his style is not as distinctive as, say, Frank Miller's. So there I was, with no style to imitate and no book to parody. Then, as happens in these cases, inspiration hit. I was driving along at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, listening to Mike Hodell's Hour 25, when I heard host Harlan Ellison's dissertation about DC and how they were arbitrarily altering the legend. Click. The light bulb went on, and I went home and wrote a satire that dealt with the impact on the characters whose lives and history had been arbitrarily altered. Mike Friedrich did a sensational job as my editor and taught me a lot, although he did make me change my beloved last line. The current one is also meant to look at a certain publisher's arbitrary dealing with history. Rich Burchett did a terrific job bringing my ideas to life, and Craig Colbert's lettering is letter perfect. Anyway, here it is. I hope it is a successful parody, but more importantly, I hope you like it. So, this story came out in 1986, this comic as well, and it features a look at how the Superman legend had been changed and how it was changing, and it does it in a humorous way. It's a humor comic. Even if you've never read The Man of Steel, like I've never read it, I'm not interested in superheroes, as I always say, this is very entertaining. This is very entertaining, and you will understand the comic book. It's a parody of Superman's origin, but also, like I said, the changes in Superman. I think, if I remember, he meets different versions of himself. He tries to come to grips, well, why are there all these different Supermen? from different time periods. They seem like different versions of the same guy, and it's like put them all together. It's like a parody of all of this together. And like Cliff wrote in the editorial about DC's altering of history, the Superman history, which, you know, this happens all the time in the comics industry, like in superhero comics, where they're changing the history of the character. So it's about that. It's a parody of that. So actually, this comic's ahead of its time, because that's more prevalent today than it was then. And it's a very entertaining read, and it has a poignant message to it as well. So this one is, I recommend this more than the last two even. So this is a really, really good Blackthorne comic. Also, as a bonus, it features all sorts of cameos by characters. Like there is Bones, maybe, from Star Trek. I've never watched Star Trek, but I think that might be Bones. Dr. McCoy. There is Rambo down there. There's Herbie. Herbie was a very strange comic character in the 1960s. I might talk about him sometime. His comic was very interesting. So, there's Rodney Dangerfield there. There's some Dick Tracy, Flat Top from Dick Tracy. That bad guy from Rocky and Bullwinkle. Boris. The Darth Vader. Oh, there's just so many cameos in this. There's Alfred E. Newman over there. There's the origin. This is the part which is a parody of Superman's original origin. You see now there's Superman as an old man. The Man of Rust. Again, this is not Superman. It's a parody of Superman. And this guy's talking to the Superman character as an old man. He's saying, do you remember when this happened and this happened? And he's like, I don't really remember that. Like, what's that all about? There's Superman with a whole bunch of different super pets. Felix the cat. Bloom County character there. Mighty Mouse. Oh, boy. Oh, it's great stuff. This is a great comic. I highly recommend this one. There's Clint Eastwood. Dirty Harry there. And Andy Rooney from 60 Minutes. You see there? Oh, I love this. I love this. I love when they have references to pop culture, like I said before. Looks like we have a Captain Marvel type thing going on there. Bozo the Clown there. There's Bozo the Clown. It's quite a well-written story. It's Charlie Brown. Stan Laurel. I mean, look at all these. Beaver from Leave It to Beaver. And so they're asking these questions. What was Creepton like, or Krypton, you know? Who survived the explosion? And the answer changes depending on which version of Superman they ask. You know, where do you get your powers? What's your secret identity? What's your favorite color? But Superman, like, everything is so weird. He just start turning to all these pop culture characters instead. Like Oliver Hardy and Mr. T. Very interesting. Very interesting stuff. Oh boy, what a good comic book. So again, I recommend that this Superman comic. It's a lot of fun. Okay. For Superman parody. Okay. I got a few other really good comics here, but they're not Blackthorne, so I guess I won't well, maybe I'll just briefly like show you a little. I might talk about these in another time, but these aren't Blackthorne. But this also came out in 1986. It's called This Is Sold Out. And this comic right here, again, it's not Blackthorne, but it is a parody of the entire comics industry at the time of the black and white comics explosion. So it's a story about what happened, basically. It goes over the history in a very, very funny way. But I might do another video just for this comic someday. So, but I do, and there's 2 issues of that. It's a 2-issue miniseries. The second issue is kind of weird because it kind of goes like it's imagining what would have happened if color comics had to become the big thing after black and white comics went out, or something like that. I forget. Like I said, I might do a video on it someday. But there's also the joke. You notice that the price, it says, is $1,500, $2,100 in Canada. And it goes up. On the second issue, it's $150,000, $225,000 in Canada. That's a comment on the investment market at the time. You remember when I said how in the black and white comics explosion, all the investors were looking for the next big thing, the next big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So every comic that came out, every black and white comic, they were buying the first issues of and driving the prices sky high. So they had these inflated values, and for a while, black and white comics were going for ridiculous amounts of money until the bubble burst, you know? So that's a satire on that. So that's what this comic's about. And they even have like a turtle and a hamster. For the turtles and the adolescent radioactive black hamsters, like, have lead roles in it, you know, because they're the ones that were responsible for this whole black and white comics explosion. Now, I know I've talked about a lot here, but so that's in case I don't make a video on this comic, but I still might someday. I definitely recommend these comics, though. They're very fun to read. So it's called Sold Out, or This Is Sold Out. Okay. I have it in with my Blackthorne comics, so I just mentioned it. Now, back to Blackthorne. The next title we're going to look at is called Failed Universe. There's only 1 issue. It's a one-shot. And this is a parody of Marvel Comics' New Universe. Expect the expected, it says. So Marvel Comics, and again, I haven't read any of their New Universe titles. I haven't, but from what I've heard is that they were really bad. And a lot of people didn't like them very much. Marvel came out with... Yeah, they envisioned a new universe of comics that they were hoping were going to be big sellers. So this was not like Spider-Man. This was not the Fantastic Four. This was not the Incredible Hulk. This was like a brand new line of superhero comics. And they all, I guess they didn't do very well. You know, they didn't sell very well. And they got criticized a lot. So Blackthorne took a shot at that line of comics. And in this comic called Failed Universe. So again, even if you're not familiar with that, you just need to know that, basically. It's entertaining. It's really entertaining. And I like it when comics companies take on other comics companies and do satires of them. I think that's really good. This was another 1986 comic. There's so many 1986 comics, and I have a lot more in my collection, believe me. We will do comics from other years, though, you know. I've just felt like doing a lot of these comics lately. But there's an ad for Man of Rust right in the inside front cover. So this isn't just a parody of the superheroes in the new universe, which it is. They do that. But it's a parody of Marvel Comics itself. So mediocre comics, they call it. Make mine mediocre. And so we see like the board meeting coming up with the new universe. And... or the failed universe, you know, and we see the thought process that went on, and it's very funny. It's very entertaining. And then they just start making fun of the actual comics in the new universe. This is one of the Misfire and the Tequila Shooters. So I can't remember what the actual comic is they're making fun of. Somebody will know. They could write it in the description. Mark Lizard Jerk. The Sioux Force. I think that one was called the Psy Force or something like that. So yeah, they make fun of the making of the superheroes in the universe, and they make fun of the comics themselves. PP7. And Amazing Heroes at the time when this came out, when it was listed in the new releases, they said, "Oh wow, let's see what kind of sense of humor Marvel Comics has," insinuating that they might have sued them over this, but they didn't though. The S-Kickers. And Just Dressed. So that's what that is. And the back cover is Sioux Force. So that's a fun comic. If you like satire, humor comics, I recommend that. Okay, the next Blackthorne comic we're going to look at is one of my absolute favorite Blackthorne comics. It is called Freak Out on Infant Earths. This is the first issue. Now, there was something called Crisis on Infinite Earths back then. I think it was a Marvel comic, and it was a big industry like thing. It was a big seller. It was a huge thing in the comics industry. Sold millions of copies. And I suppose that this might be a parody of it, but I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Not being familiar with that. I mean, the title is obviously. The story could be, but if you've never heard of that, Crisis on Infinite Earths, it doesn't make any difference. Because this comic is just really, really, really entertaining. It's written by Don Chin, who is one of my favorite writers from the 1980s. He's the guy that did the adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters. And he also had his own company called Parody Press in the 1990s, which published parody comics, satires of famous comic books from DC, Marvel, Image, Valiant, those kind of publishers. And they're a lot of fun to collect. They also did like Ren and Stimpy parody books. They did Beavis and Butthead. They did Barney, the Purple Dinosaur. They did the X-Files. Oh, they did Baywatch comic. Like they did all these different comics. And someday I'd like to make a video about Parody Press. But anyway, Don Chin was a very funny writer. Very funny writer. And he's a very nice guy, too. Whenever anybody talks about the hamsters on YouTube, he always writes a comment in the comment box below the video, like thanking them for mentioning his comic and talking about it. Even if they're not complimentary towards his comic, like if they are, that's great. But even if they're not, he thanks them for just talking about it. This guy is just the nicest guy you can imagine. And there's tons of interviews with him on YouTube with Don Chin. But I don't think a single one of those interviews, I don't think anybody's ever asked him about this comic book, Freak Out on Infant Earths, because I don't think anybody knows about this comic book. Besides me, I guess. So I'm telling you about this, and I'm recommending it to you because this is so much fun. This story. So what it is, you say, okay, well, Tom, you keep saying it's so great, but you haven't said what it's about. what it is he throws a bunch of characters together into a situation, and they have to fight some big enemy, and they're paired off into two teams. And it's just, the dialogue is just so much fun. The way the characters interact with each other, they're so different from each other. They're so fully realized, even though this comic only lasted for 2 issues. It was supposed to go longer, and I'm so sad that it didn't. It was supposed to be, 7, 8 issues, 12 issues? I don't remember. But it only lasted for 2 issues because, the implosion happened in 1987, and these black and white comics, were in danger after that. There were just too many of them around. But these are all the characters on the cover. So all these characters are actually in the book, and each one of them has a distinct personality and hilarious personality. And Don Chin is that good of a writer that he is able to do that in the space of 2 issues. There's some sort of overseer, like the Watcher or something. So I guess it is a parody of Crisis on Infinite Earths, as well as a great comic in its own right. See, I didn't even know that when I first read this. I just loved the comic anyway, right? So it works on 2 levels. So this Watcher type character is watching, and he sees there's a big stir up in the universe. So he gets all these characters together, like I said, to fight the enemy. And what happens is we're treated to the backstories. Like I said, there's a lot of dialogue between the characters, but eventually it leads up into backstories about each and every character. So you get their background, and their backgrounds are so much fun to read. They're so funny. Unfortunately, you don't get the background of every character because it only lasted 2 issues. So we only got as far as the 2 issues go. But who did the artwork in this? I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so it was created by Don Chin and Herb Wood. Now, Herb Wood also worked on the Hamsters with Don Chin as well. The letters are by Diane Valentino. So I assume that Herb Wood is the artist, because it doesn't say. It just is created by Don Chin and Herb Wood. I assume that he's the artist and Don Chin is the writer. Yeah. So I think I showed you this. Did I show you this already? I think I did. Oh, and again, I'm a sucker for dialogue when it's entertaining dialogue, and there's a lot of dialogue in this comic. The first issue is the best issue, but obviously I'd recommend both issues. So this part is the backstory of that, of the army sergeant type character. And then there's like a ninja type guy. And you get his backstory there. Oh man, this is funny. This is so good. This is one of my favorite comics ever. You have this guy's the son of death. This character here. And he's trying to impress his dad or something like that. And you get his backstory. And he wants to be loved, but... So they hug him, but the unfortunate thing is when he's hugged, they get you get a cold or something. You get sick. Oh man, this is... The ninja... And every one of them is like a parody of different comics. So it's like a parody of army comics, like ninja comics. And the serious stories in them. So then you get the ninja's backstory here. Slicing bread there. Then the football player's backstory. Oh yeah. This is I think this is where they land in the place where they're gonna have to fight all these characters up here. So that's the first issue. There's the back cover. So second issue. Second and last issue. Yeah, you'll see this listed online as a mini-series, but it isn't. I mean, it was supposed to last longer. It just lasted for 2 issues. That cover's not as good as the first one, in my opinion. Some people might disagree. So this is the other team you see floating through the ice on their way to the battle. And let's see here. Actually, you know what? I want to read you the story so far, just in case there's anything that might interest you that I haven't mentioned. Our universe is under attack by the most vicious, lonesome, disgusting beings. The Lockjaws. Crude, rude, and socially unacceptable, they revel in destruction, bathe in carnage, and never watch Phil Donahue. See, Phil Donahue was a talk show host at the time who was supposed to be very sensitive, like Oprah Winfrey was later. She kind of like, he was the sensitive talk show host before Oprah Winfrey, and then she came along, they were kind of competing for a while, and then she just kind of took over. But so they never watched Phil Donahue because they're not sensitive types. That's the joke there. But their swath of devastation has not gone unnoticed. The janitor, cleaner of the cosmos, so that the Watcher character is called the janitor, okay, has witnessed their approach, and in an effort to stem the tide of ruin, has gathered together a ragtag band of mighty defenders who would otherwise be on the welfare line. Splitting them into groups and encasing them in cosmic transport tubes, the janitor sends them into space to engage the Lockjaws in mortal combat, with the fate of the entire multiverse in the balance. Join Sergeant Gonzo Rucker, Air Girl, Heroine Without a Brain, Joe Ninja, the Metal Cowboy, Gore the Redeemer, and the Amphibian Legend, the Toad Warrior, as they rush to engage their feckless foes. And now the next exciting chapter. So the artwork in this one looks a lot different to me. Let's see. Writer Don Chin, pencils Herb Wood, inks Herb Wood, and Dringenberg and Chin. And letters by Ray. I think they're all the guys that worked on the hamsters. No, it looks different though. Maybe it's just the black backgrounds. And just all the blacks used in the panel. A lot of black ink in this one. I don't think there was as much in the first one. Let's see. No. See, this one, it's mostly like white backgrounds. So that's why it looks different, I guess. I wonder why they, what that decision was behind that. So you get some more backstories. This is where the baseball guy, this is his origin story. He's going against some punks in the neighborhood. And he scores a home run against them. That's pretty funny. This is good stuff. And this is weird. So you get the backstory of the Arrow character. So actually this comic only has 2 backstories. See, the first one had like a bunch of different stuff going on in it, but this only has like 2 backstories, this one. So they take a longer time with the backstories of the Slugger here and the Arrow Man. His name's Arrow Man, and he was a character created by Don Chin, written and drawn by Don Chin. So this portion of the comic is actually drawn by Don Chin as well. I have this feeling, but I'm not certain, that this was actually done for something else and not this comic book. And they just interpolated it into the comic book. Because I have seen this story somewhere else. I have it in another comic book, an anthology comic or something, which might have been published before this, but I'm not certain if it was. I'm not sure if it was before or after this. But he did use this story again in something else. Also, he published an Arrow Man one-shot under his Parody Press publishing company in the 90s, which I think is also the same story. But I don't have it, though. I don't have that comic book. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Maybe it wasn't in another comic. Maybe it was in that comic book. Because I think I read that online. Yeah, I don't like to read things online very much because it's more fun just to have them. You know, so I've kind of stopped doing that. But I did read that online once, I remember. And I thought the story seemed very familiar, but I wasn't sure why. And it's because it was in this comic. So maybe this was first then, because that was in the 1990s. But this is different. It like changes the tone of the comic book. But it's funny though. It's funny. It's a good story. And you don't see Don Chin do his own artwork very often. So again, I highly recommend this. So I don't know. I know my friend Newt bought the whole run of Laffin Gas after I talked about it. I might be giving him a few more comics here to hunt down. Look at this. Look how the ink comes off on these Blackthorne comics, though. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? So anyway, I recommend that one the most out of the Blackthorne comics. Freak Out on Infant Earth. Next one we're going to look at is called Possibleman. This is a William Van Horn comic. Now you remember I mentioned that William Van Horn became a Disney cartoonist later on, and he started off with Blackthorne doing a comic called Nervous Rex about a dinosaur, and he did a bunch of stories in Laffin Gas. Well, this was another comic that he did. I think he did the comic called Tracker as well for Blackthorne, which I don't have. I think that might be a William Van Horn comic as well. But anyway, he tried a superhero comic called Possibleman. But being William Van Horn, being Blackthorne, and being a humor comic, this is not your typical superhero comic. It's a humor comic, so, I mean, that's why I have it. I like it. So the idea in this is this guy is a very nerdy fellow in his regular when he's just a regular guy. But he has some kind of superhero that when he blows his nose, he can turn into something else. But the problem is, he can't control what he turns into. So, I mean, he wants to turn into a superhero, right? Like on the cover here, to fight the bad guys. In this one, the Zit Queen is the bad girl in this comic. And you get Zit Queen's story. You get her backstory. So it actually starts off with her backstory. The Zit Queen. This guy's a great storyteller, William Van Horn. So this is another really fun comic from Blackthorne that probably hardly anybody's ever heard of. So you get her backstory. And then you learn about that Dexter Smeel. So Dexter Smeel, there he is in his regular form, is the guy that finds he has a superpower where he can blow his nose and turn into a superhero. So he could turn into this, or he can turn into a breadbasket, or a rock, or a lamppost, or something. So he doesn't know what he's going to turn into when he blows his nose. He doesn't know if he's going to turn into a superhero or not. So that creates for funny situations, as you can imagine. I haven't read this in quite a while. That's when he turns into Possibleman. Sometimes he has to blow his nose a bunch of times to do that. Now, I'm not sure how he blows his nose when he's like a box or something, or a rock. Maybe he just stays that way for a little bit and then... Or maybe he can just will himself to turn back. I don't know. I don't remember. You have to buy it to find out. But... that's the comic. And there's quite a bit of story here. So there's another fun little comic for you. Parody, an advertisement for Nervous Rex on the back. William Van Horn's most long-lived comic with Blackthorne. I believe it did last for 9 issues. I believe that was the last issue. So Possibleman lasted for 2 issues. None of these comics lasted too long. So here's the second and last issue where he... it's weird too, see, that the title is on the side like that. That's unusual. But he faces the Tapioca Terror. He's another guy where his style is all his own. It's fascinating just the way he lays out the stories, the way he does the titles, how he does the stories in parts. So it's a natural progression from one part to another. So if you like his stories in Nervous Rex, if you like his stories in Laffin Gas, I do recommend this comic as well. Okay. And the last comic we're going to look at today, the last Blackthorne comic, is Legion of Stupid Heroes. Number 1, and I think this was a one-shot. I don't think it was supposed to last any longer than that. So this one here is like, so long, hi, I have 2 stupid heroes ready to replace you, plus I'll get rich selling comics of discontinued heroes. So that guy on the cover, by the way. Okay, so this comic is by Taylor Overby, who, if you watch my Laffin Gas video, you'll remember that he did a bunch of stories in Laffin Gas as well. And I said that his style was very reminiscent of the early Mad comics. So very Will Elder influenced, especially. He uses a lot of chicken fat, which chicken fat was what they called what Will Elder did in his panels, when he would just cram the panels with as much as he possibly could, like every little joke, every little gag. You look in the background, you see something funny going on, you see little signs, you see little sight gags, all this sort of stuff. They call that chicken fat. So he does that sort of thing too, and he's just very, very influenced by the early Mad comics and Harvey Kurtzman's style. So his artwork's great. The story is not fantastic. It's not absolutely hilarious. And if I remember, the ending was pretty lame to this. But his artwork, though, is really, really fun. And he crams a lot of jokes in there. So even if the story isn't the best, there's a lot to like here. There's a lot to enjoy here. And if you like his stories in Laffin Gas, if you've read Laffin Gas, then I don't see why you wouldn't like this comic as well. You also get, like in the Man of Rust, you get some cameos from other pop culture characters. That guy looks like Archie Andrews again. They love putting Archie and his pals in comic parodies, and they're always fun to see. Betty and Veronica, and Jughead, and Reggie. I was going to say, I don't know if I finished my sentence or not, I don't remember, but that the character there on the cover, and he's also in the comic, looks very, very much like a famous character in Mad Comics called The Shadow. Well, it was a parody of The Shadow, And his name was like Shadow Boomyowski or something like that. When I was a kid, that's how I used to say his name. I said it's the Shadow Boomyowski. If you know about Mad Comics and you know that character, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you just think, well, that was weird. But yeah, he's obviously inspired by that. I mean, you know. So yeah, it's like a Wonder Woman. There's like a Superman and a Wonder Woman character. I already showed you that page, but I already showed you that page. That's the one I showed you. I don't know if I showed you this one. Yeah, I did show you that one, didn't I? But anyway, there's Batman, of course, too. You get him in here. So yeah, somebody's killing off the superheroes, or it's called stupid heroes in this. That's what they call them. And why is it happening? And it's like a whole lead up. And I think the ending was a letdown. Like you're hoping for a big payoff, but I don't think it really came. There's Herbie again. but yeah, I still recommend this for the artwork. And if you're a fan of that style, that goofy kind of, early Mad style, which, I mean goofy as in, the stories were silly and goofy and everything. The artwork was unbelievable. I've said before, I think Will Elder. I honestly, Mad had a lot of great artists, obviously. Jack Davis, Will Elder, Wally Wood. Oh, man, Wally Wood. Angelo Torres, Mort Drucker, Al Jaffe, of course, Don Martin. Oh, so much Sergio Aragonis. So many people, right? But I think Wally Wood and Bill Elder were the absolute best artists that Mad ever had, in my humble opinion. I'm always blown away by their artwork. Oh man, they were great. So anyway, that's the video for today. I hope you all, it was a very long video. Oops. Nah, it doesn't matter. Some of you like long videos. So, and they're not always this long. But anyway, that was a fun look at some humor comics from Blackthorne. I hope you really enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you liked it, and the comments that you have on these comics. You can talk about any of these comics. There's a lot of comics to talk about today because I went through a bunch of different ones. So, I mean, and that warrants a big video too, doesn't it? Because I talked about a bunch of different titles in one video. So anyway, yeah, so that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this visit with Tom's Comic Curios and enjoyed looking at these very obscure Blackthorne humor comics. Some of them quite good, in my opinion. And maybe you'll track them down yourself and have a read, So I'll see y'all next time.